Learning about patriotism from an unlikely place, the fine line between Hooah and Stupid. That's all coming up on today's edition of The Hot Zone.
This is The Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, I'm sure you're looking forward to the weekend. I know I am. I'm out here at Rio Hato, Decameron. I promise you though, you're not looking forward to your weekend nearly as much as I am. It's been a really tough couple of weeks for me, to say the least. My mom's cancer diagnosis was a real shock, obviously, and we've been dealing with that. I hope you never have to do it. Let's just put it that way. I really appreciate your prayers though. Prayer is more than just sending good thoughts at somebody. It really tangibly changes things. And I say that because I've seen it myself so many times throughout my own life. It's also a huge help to know that I can go talk to the creator of the universe anytime I want, and more importantly, to trust that he's in control and is working out his plan for my life. My mom taught me that. Now, you know, we're not guaranteed another day on this planet. So if I woke up this morning, there's probably something important I'm supposed to be doing. And if you follow me on the podcast or social media, you know that I spend a lot of time in dangerous places around the world. And I don't take that risk lightly, but it's what I was made to do. And it's intensely interesting and meaningful work. So for me, it's worth it. Which is why I'm not really into all the extreme sports stuff. I mean, I like adrenaline as much as the next guy, but when it comes down to it, throwing yourself off a bridge or setting a land speed record or something doesn't really bring any meaning to your life. I guess I'm a purpose junkie more than an adrenaline junkie. But in the pursuit of purpose, I get all the adrenaline that I need. So I'm kind of skeptical of this one particular extreme activity, the running of the bulls. That happens every year in Pamplona, Spain. Now, I can appreciate the history of the sport, and if you call running away from angry beef a sport, but I can't see it much of a point in it anyway. Every year, hundreds of thrill-seeking dudes dress up and see how close they can come to getting killed by stampeding cattle. Okay. Everyone else comes out to watch, but you know we're only watching out of sheer morbid curiosity, waiting for the next unfortunate runner to get gored or trampled. It's like watching car racing just for the crashes, I guess, or maybe watching hockey just for the fights. Well, this year one American disregarded the advice of his friends and family and went and participated in that event anyway. And everything was going great until it wasn't. Check this out.
We got in, the bulls came in right to my right, and all the bulls passed. And we counted.
Yeah.
There were a group of us that were counting, and we counted. I did it solo, but there were several of us that were looking, and with our fingers, you could tell we were all doing the same thing to make sure they all passed.
Okay.
And then I took out my phone to take a quick 5-second video just to say that I finished, because I thought all the bulls had passed, and they actually started to close the entrance where the bulls came in, so that's why we thought everything was done.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. There was a straggler, and I turned, and it was like a truck or a car just hit me in the side of the head, and I put my hand on my neck, and I saw blood, and I felt that I could just feel that my neck was opened up, and I was stunned. And then some random guy grabbed my wrist, and knew that I was hurt, and just ran me to the medics. The horn went into my neck, but went straight up instead of straight back. If it went straight back, I probably wouldn't be here. And it went straight up into my cheek, which is why I'm here.
So, yeah, let that be a lesson to you boys and girls. The world's a dangerous place all by itself. You should think hard about how to make it more meaningful and be brave in so doing. But if you decide to run with the bulls, you better know how to move. And that's what my kids would call a dad joke. All right, let's move on to West Africa. The number of Ebola cases is now north of 2,000, over 1,400 deaths. If you followed the podcast for a while, you've heard some of the world's top experts on Ebola explain this horrible disease, which kills about 90% of those who are infected. It could easily get loose and end up killing millions or even tens of millions of people. And that's why it's so frustrating that the aid workers and the doctors who are trying to contain the outbreak keep getting attacked by the very people that they're trying to help, the villagers and criminal militias. Make no mistake, folks, Ebola is one of the greatest potential threats the world is facing right now. Here's an aid worker who's been in the fight since against Ebola, since the big outbreak that we had in 2014.
People had experienced seeing family members or community members going to these Ebola treatment centres and never coming back. And this had a opposite effect to what had been wanted, because it simply made people frightened.
There hasn't been an Ebola outbreak in my experience with the frightened community that we don't see issues of community acceptance and community trust. This is a traumatised community living in a highly volatile zone who are not trusting of outsiders at the best of times. That is not what has stopped us running public health operations. What has interrupted our public health operations in the main has been large-scale violence against the response by armed attackers.
There were alternative narratives within the community as to what was going on, whether that be that this was the result of witchcraft or curses, or whether that this was a conspiracy brought by Westerners. So this was, an added complexity and added challenge to the response, and it highlighted the importance of engaging with the community early on and listening to them and understanding what their fears were. During that time, I was eating, sleeping, waking, breathing Ebola. It influenced everything. You don't touch other people. That's not just at work. That's all the time. So even just normal human interactions change. I was probably paranoid, I would say. I was paranoid about the people around me, about the people I worked with, the people that I was caring for. I was also paranoid for myself and what would happen if I got infected? How would my family react? Would I stay in West Africa? Would I be evacuated? Would I get treatment? You're in a very hot climate, and every time I felt quite warm, I would question whether or not I was beginning to get a fever. Had I slipped up somehow? Had I not washed my hands at an appropriate time? And a lot of that actually is quite illogical if you apply the basic sciences of Ebola as a virus. At the beginning of the outbreak, I absolutely was terrified, and I think that's true of many of my colleagues. It was a huge unknown. The situation was growing around us. It felt that it was exponential, and there were very limited responses coming into the country. There was also, at that time, we didn't know a huge amount about Ebola. We didn't know a huge amount about a massive Ebola outbreak because there had never been anything like that before. It was unprecedented, as there was more survivors who were returning to their homes and able to say, look, this is what happened, and this is, I went into the Ebola treatment centre, and actually, yes, they are wearing these very frightening yellow suits, but then they did look after me, and and I've come back and I can tell you that they didn't harvest my organs or steal my blood or inject me with a disease, as some of those theories that were going around were. Then the reaction of the local population changed.
So today's outbreak is spreading, with the first confirmed cases now in Uganda, causing local authorities and medical personnel there to step up their efforts to check people coming across the border.
The Ebola outbreak in the DRC is still going on. And by today, we have over 2,000 confirmed cases. And so the probability of more cases crossing over from the DRC into Uganda is very high. And so apart from the cases that we already have in country, many other cases may come into the country. Right now we don't have any probable cases because the probable cases are the ones who have turned positive after the tests were carried out. But we are keeping a very close eye on the family because we have a complete family that came in from the DRC with this lady, together with her husband, who are very close contacts of the first case that passed away. So we are keeping a very close watch. For now, they have not developed any signs and symptoms, and the teams are monitoring them very closely.
USAID Director Mark Green recently spoke about this and pointed out the sort of trifecta of threat they're seeing in West Africa that's made many other African countries start refusing entry to any travelers coming from the affected area.
As we all know, a deadly virus has struck a region of Africa that was already besieged over the years by a number of failures in development, a failure of democracy and a failure of governance. And this is a combustible, deadly mix. And I think going forward, a number of things will need to happen. With over 2,168 cases and over 1,400 deaths, we need to turn distrust in the community, which has been well reported by many of you, into an asset. We need to turn it into a community-based response. We need a response that engages all parts of the community, not only to tackle the virus, but to rebuild the institutions that will be necessary so as not to leave the area vulnerable again for the next shock which could come its way.
Now, the scary thing is, if you go back to what we talked about on yesterday's podcast, the number of Africans leaving their countries and making the long trek to Europe and the United States, and those who are coming are getting increasingly desperate. And recently, there were protests and riots on the Libyan coast in migrant shelters because the Africans are saying conditions are terrible and they aren't being allowed to get on boats fast enough. I played some of that video on yesterday's podcast. And that goes back to the increasing hostility to irregular migration that we're seeing all across Europe. But if Ebola manages to hitch a ride north with one of those migrants, the state of the camps would almost guarantee a massive outbreak. Add that to the fact that hundreds are flying to Ecuador every day and within weeks could be arriving on the U.S. southern border. Well, it almost seems like a miracle Ebola hasn't spread around the world already. So that's very exciting, obviously. Nothing like some possible global apocalypse to get you in the mood for the weekend. I'm sorry about that, but let's lighten things up a little bit. This is one of the coolest things I have seen lately. It's 35,000 people coming together in the Eastern European country of Estonia to sing patriotic songs about their homeland. Check it out. Well, they interviewed some of the people who participated to find out what it's all about, and I have to say their English is incredibly good.
There are some songs that when you start singing them, you just can't hold your emotions back, and the tears just start coming.
For me, patriotism is more about feeling as one with your nation rather than like celebrating your nation. It's more about feeling as one with everyone who's here today.
Yeah, Estonians love to say that it was singing that made us free. So I think everybody believes that, and I think we have to kind of respect that and keep our country free.
Well, I don't know about you, but I really like their take on patriotism and freedom. So have a good weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here next week on the Hot Zone, and in the meantime, I'm going to go have a nice weekend here at Decameron on the Pacific coast of Panama. You know, this resort used to be a military base, believe it or not. About 30 years ago, I came flying right over that island right there back behind me and off this direction over here and parachuted into Rio Hato, the military base where the 6th and 7th Special Forces companies of the Panamanian military were located. And if you had told me back then that one day I would be walking along this beach, sitting with my wife, enjoying a sunset and pina colada, I would have had a hard time figuring out how we got from taking out Noriega, his beach house is right back behind me back there, to today. So you just never know how your life's going to end up, and I think that's pretty cool.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.